And so I'd like to welcome our guests today. And we have Anne Reed, and Anne is a parent of a child who lives with mental illness. And we have Cheryl Stoller, Cheryl is a family well-being coach who works with parents, and she is in Illinois. And Cheryl, can you tell us what is a family well-being coach? And I think, Cheryl, you are muted.
Mute. Hi, so sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This family well-being coach is someone who goes side by side with parents, understanding that each one of you is, in your own right, naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And I help you come back to yourself, loving how you're showing up to yourself, showing up to your family, showing up to your kids, showing up to life, so that you get to thrive even through all of these difficulties of what these roads are that we face when we're living in a place where mental illness is part of life. And so finding our way back to ourselves so we can resource ourselves, so we can be the best resource we can be for our children. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'm Jennifer Sevick, and I'm not only the clinical director here, but I'm also a parent of a child who lives with mental illness. He was diagnosed at age 6 with bipolar. And prior to that, though, he was diagnosed originally, oh gosh, even as a baby, it was developmental delays from apraxia of speech, different OT issues, PT issues, speech issues, and working to catch him up to his typically developing peers. But then it was sensory processing disorder. Then we moved on to, I think, general anxiety disorder, adjustment disorder, eventually ADHD. Then it felt like the alphabet soup because we also had major depression. And then finally arriving at the diagnosis of bipolar. So it was a little bit of just swimming and all of these letters and all of these diagnoses and what does that mean? And my understanding is a lot of parents go through that that's not unusual. And did you find that as a parent that you had a similar experience in terms of different
I
diagnoses?
did. And I ended up, I have to admit it, feeling helpless, hopeless, and overwhelmed. But as you were doing the list, I actually added a couple I'd forgotten. It's the ADHD, depressive, oppositional defiant, OCD, borderline, the sensory processing, and definitely the anxiety disorder. And I only have a little envy for Jen that her child was diagnosed at age 6 because mine was over 18 when we finally figured out what was going on. And it takes a normal time is 10 years for a child to be accurately diagnosed.
Yeah, and what is I think when I look back at that process, though, how strange it was because you would think my background is I'm also a mental health provider. I still had trouble and went through this grief period of denial because even as they were telling me that he was at risk for bipolar, they meant now. And what I heard was, oh, like when he's 19 or 20. And then it even lowered the bar, a little bit of bargaining, I think, of like, oh, you mean when he's a teenager? And they meant like now. And I couldn't conceptualize the 6-year-old would live with severe and persistent mental illness. Even though I had worked with kids who were young, it was sort of like this, but that couldn't possibly happen to my kid. And I can't explain it. I don't know why, but it was going through all of that. And Cheryl, what do you do? Because I was very lucky. My husband, he and I were always on the same page. Is it common or does it happen where parents are not on the same page when they've received this alphabet soup of
Absolutely.
yeah, what do you do?
Well, first of all, what I do is help them know that they're not alone. So it includes some group work. So I get some of the couples together, as well as doing the private coaching. Being there for them, meeting each one of them where they are, with the compassion, with the curiosity about what it is that that experience is like for them, in the presence of the partner, the parenting partner. And in that process, they begin to see a side of them that they fell in love with originally. Because in the dynamic with me, they don't have the same relationship as they do with the spouse. So the sage part of them comes out with me, and it becomes visible again to the parent. So I'm fully there, catching some terms are their shiny parts, and helping them remember who they really are while they're together. And that is part of that's just a small part. I mean, I couldn't possibly explain how this whole dynamic works, but I talk about getting in the same playbook, not on the same page. It's like a team going for the same goal, but everybody has their own strengths, their own position, their own strengths. And what does it take to play that position? And we learn to cover for each other.
Yeah,
And
I love that. I think that's so beautiful. I've never heard anyone say that before. Like that is mind blowing to me that you are in the same playbook, but not on the same page. I think that's beautiful.
I'm glad.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's okay, and it's actually stronger.
It's much stronger.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard it put that way before either, Cheryl.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
Well, and not only that, it's when you said, helping them to remember who they are, where that really hit home for me was that I was drowning because I was searching and seeking for answers and what is the next step and what do we need to do and what is the treatment to manage this and like what are the resources, and I was drowning, and it became all about being this mom who had to manage everything and to get every step right. And so if I were honest to look back, I guess I never really thought about like what are the parts of myself that I had to set aside
Yeah.
in order to move through this process because it was just so new and it was so overwhelming. It didn't matter that I had some knowledge behind me. It was just where do we go from here? And one of the other things that happened, I guess, fairly early on when he was, oh gosh, he was 5. We were introduced to a stimulant medication when he was diagnosed with ADHD. And then when he had a major depression episode, likely triggered by eventually the stimulant, um, then what happened was that stimulant medication pretty soon triggered mania. So then we were off to antipsychotic medications and then trying different antipsychotic medications. And the stimulant wasn't easy either because like we had all these different types of stimulants that we were trying to figure out the right one. And so it became very overwhelming very quickly. And so I guess, Anne, does that resonate with you that path to treatment and management, that it was confusing or overwhelming or there was just so much of it?
It was definitely overwhelming, and it was totally exhausting. I don't know any other word for it. I mean, I didn't feel like there was any more of me inside sometimes. Like I just left it all out there. And the comment on the stimulant, I mean, I don't even remember how many different medications we tried. And I mean, it had to have been more than 20. And I know some people have done a lot more. But it was 5 years later, and I was still finding my daughter's stimulants, like stuffed inside a shoe or a drawer or whatever. She hated them. And she kept trying to tell me she didn't want to take them. And being a good mom and trying to be compliant with what all the doctors were telling me, I was almost trying to force feed her some of the meds that were being prescribed. And it gets to be a really vicious cycle. And I think as a parent, I mean, she was young when we were starting this, and it was so hard to not listen to her in hindsight, but for her to express how a lot of them were making her feel, which a lot of times was not good. So, I mean, now we're on the perfect cocktail, but it took 10 years to get there. And that goes to really trying to keep moving forward to the accurate diagnosis, because then the medications, if you need them, whatever pharmacological agents, then get very tailored and specific to what the real problem is.
Yeah, in part of that though, I think that as a parent, I felt kind of defeated because it seemed like we had, like, what else was left to try? Like,
Yeah.
it seems like we ran through everything. And I know now we didn't, but it just seemed like we were running out of options. And so, Cheryl, what do you do for parents, or what can they do when they just feel so defeated that they feel like they've tried everything medication wise that they can, that they've tried every therapeutic approach from play therapy to DBT to EMDR to, all of the letters that they do, and still they feel like it's just defeating.
It is defeating. It feels defeating. Our nervous system, our body is saying, we can't handle all of this. Period. End of sentence. So it has to start shutting things down, whether it's feeling our own emotions, feeling our own sensations. When Anne, you mentioned just feeling so exhausted, I felt like my cells were like sucked dry. I just felt like every cell in my body was sucked dry. I've heard from other parents, I heard a story about their child was trying to say, I don't want to take it. I don't want to take it. So they were fighting it. And it was helping them after the fact cope with what was going on. What happened is that mother had gone off to a class, but before she did, she had asked the child, why don't you want it? Like asking, does it make you feel blank? Does it do this? Does it do that? And the child did not respond. He said, no, 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 no. And then the question was, is it making you feel like you're living your life outside of your body? And the child started crying. The mother went off to whatever class she was going to, came back. The pills were gone. A whole bottle of pills. He was not in sight. Whole bottle of pills. Fear, obviously, understandably. She found them. All the pills were in a garbage can. Thank goodness the kid didn't do it down the toilet, because then she wouldn't have known. But helping the parent and the child know we're in this together. We're going to figure this out one step at a time, and I'm really going to listen. So a huge part of what I do is helping the parents feel fully listened to, have me as their safe harbor for offload, rest, digest, refuel, and equipped and empowered with the support, knowledge, and know-how to come back to that connection and that love, so that the fear is not running their actions. Because when fear, which is understandable, fear, this is danger and we have to do something. but I don't know if you've experienced or anybody else has experienced when there's an actual emergency. Some people do collapse, but others just go into super, I got this and I'm doing this, and then afterwards collapse. Yeah. So that super, I've got this, it's discernment of the danger rather than fear of the danger. Fear tells our body to fight or run. Discernment, clarity. Yeah, this is danger, and this is what I have to figure, and this is what I do. Helping the parents I coach get to that place of catching that fear taking over our bodies, depleting our bodies, despair, giving up, knowing what to do with our bodies in that moment so that we are no longer being pulled by all of that. We unhinge from it, and then we have access to that brilliant, fully integrated, holistic, this is the problem, this is what I know about it, this is what I'm going to do about it, from love and discernment. And then we activate on doing what's needed in the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a journey and it's a process. And for me, I always had the support of my husband, and I was very lucky because I had the support of his pediatricians who happened to be my coworkers. So they were very lovely in that process. We had a great psychiatrist who, from the time that he was 6, he still has, and he's 17 now. And so that's not typical that people have that. So I always had hope, and I knew that this could be managed. And it didn't seem so, maybe it should have been seen as scary to me, but it really, that wasn't, it just wasn't for me. Where I was drowning, where I felt overwhelmed, partly with the medication because I just thought in my mind, like, okay, we're just running out. And that just wasn't true. It was a false narrative that I told myself. And again, that support system with the psychiatrist is like, oh no, there's many more things to go through. But I couldn't comprehend that. And I couldn't take it in. I couldn't listen to that. But I always had really great resources where I ran into some challenges is our school system. I remember, and it's weird because I taught parenting classes. Like I worked with parents, and so on the very first day, my son's assistant teacher said, "Oh, Mrs. Sevick, I have a son exactly like yours. Only I don't need medication because I know how to parent." And then I had another district level person tell me, oh, Mrs. Savick, and this is just in one of our many school official meetings that we had. Um, she said, you just need to accept, using that word acceptance, you just need to accept that it never gets better, it always gets worse. And I never believed that.
Ooh.
I always believed the opposite, really strongly believed the opposite. But Anne, what was that like for you? Did you meet challenges with different systems, like school
I
systems or?
did, but I'm going to digress just one second, Cheryl, because you said something about fear, and this is new to me. I mean, just in what you were saying, Jen was saying she always had hope, etc. It really hit me as you were talking how fearful I was going through a lot of this. I mean, I had a ton of resources, access to professionals and whatever. I was incredibly grateful. But I was the one who was always pushing, and the fear was many levels, which is what hit me. One is, was I doing damage to my child with all these different medications? Was I doing damage to our relationship? Would we ever get along? Because we had so many diagnoses that weren't accurate, like, would she ever be accurately diagnosed? I mean, I didn't have the hope. And I also realized as you were talking, my fear was, is my life going to be like this forever? And is she ever going to be functional? I mean, my fear went the whole range from like that moment to as far in the future as I could see. So, and I didn't realize how much fear there really was in there for all of us. And that time, I mean all levels.
Yeah. And so self-compassion, I just sort of want to bring that in right now, right here in that moment for you. And if you listen to these 4 phrases, I'm going to say, thank you for sharing that with me. You can thank yourself. Thank you for letting me really hear that, saying that to myself. Thank you. It is so understandable that I was so fully in fear. Sage me, discerning, wise, grounded, resourced me. I'm here for you now. I've got this. And if we choose to and have time separately, what do you need? Inside, talking to myself, what does that part of me need? Do I need to cry those tears that I didn't cry because I didn't realize how much fear was running my life and everything it was just in the air. I remember thinking with one client that it sounded, and I think she used or it was him. It's like I walk in from work and I feel like I can cut the air with a knife. It's so intense. And that fear, mourning it, grieving it, and bringing ourselves the soothing and the reassurance that it's a feeling. I can actually let myself notice the sensations it's causing in my body. I can then get curious about the sensations itself. And then when we direct our mind to focus on the sensations, automatically we are not so run by that amygdala, by the fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
Well, you create this transition out of its hold on us, getting into, okay, there's something in this moment that I'm going to turn around. I'm going to turn muck into fertilizer. Don't know what it is, but there's some positive potential in this moment. Maybe it's an opportunity to reassure myself I'm not alone. There are other people in the world. I love my child, and that's what counts. And I'm going to make sure that they have me as the grounded source of love and security to anchor to. And that is my goal as a parent coach, is to be the place where they can clear out their system and I pour in love and knowledge, etc. And then they can do the same with their kids. They are so taken care of in how they're taking care of themselves with me, with the communities we create. And then they have that to give. In addition to our figuring out together, what is the puzzle of this child? What is everything they're doing is a clue about the best their system has. And it becomes fun. It's helping them become a detective that I'm not afraid of that. And I remember one client saying, bring it on. They got to a point in our process where it was like, bring it on, because I don't know that I'm influencing you, child, unless you're expressing something. I need us to have this communication so that I, as the parent, is what she realized she needs to be able to use. You're having a hard time? That's okay. That's great. I'm here for you. We're in this together, and we together know how to find our way through. Coming back to loving ourselves through it, loving them through it, just loving them.
Yeah, I hear that, like, once we go through to get to the point of accepting that this is what it is, but then also I think as a parent of really reaching that understanding that this is not willful or purpose behavior. My child is
Every
not.
clue is a symptom. And
Yeah, and so we say that these are not behaviors, that these are symptoms. And so that means that these are just observable physiological responses to a biological internal trigger. And so really that helps me to understand my child better, that
Absolutely.
he cannot help what is happening when he is not well, and he's been stable for quite some time, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have some ups and downs, and that I need to be aware of what are symptoms so that I can be on the lookout to help him, and that our relationship is bidirectional. And so that's the most important relationship, one of the two most important relationships in my life. um, and so I need to work on it as a parent. So I have to work on myself. So I really liked what you had said in the beginning of like, well, I think this was before we had talked about, you had said when we had met earlier, planning this meeting, you had said that part of your work is helping parents to discover who they were before that diagnosis. And so for me, it was weird because it was all about focusing on this and managing this and the best treatment. And I had set aside a part of myself, and I had put so much energy and so much focus into this and losing myself. And it may have been necessary at
Right.
that time. But I had to find my way back to that,
Absolutely.
and I had to model self-care. I had to model forgiveness. I had to forgive myself because I made a lot of mistakes, and I will continue to make mistakes. I'm not perfect. And if you ask my 17-year-old son if I'm perfect, sometimes he jokes with me. He says, you're a therapist and you're professional and you're like, you did that. I'm like, I'm sorry. And so he'll tease me in a good way, but really practicing that self-care so that he knows that he needs to take care of himself, and that's been modeled, and he'll be able to tell. I mean, he does tell me like, I think I'm experiencing this, or I need this right now, and so he's able to. But that took work. It didn't get to that point. It took actually action moving forward. And, I talked about the challenges a little bit with schools, and that, we were actively being, I don't know, I guess blamed is the right, it felt like that, blame. We were told that we just need to hold him accountable for his actions. And again, these weren't behaviors, these were symptoms. We were denied an IEP. And I look back at that and my mind is blown. We had a 504 that did not meet his needs and ultimately had to homeschool our child. And so I had to get to a place where I had to create the community of support in order to care for myself, in order to care for my child. And so, and I'm just curious because I had to build that. It was by the providers, it was by the careful cultivation of who are my friends that I spend my energy and my time with.
Mhm.
We have a homeschooling co-op that ultimately we decided that that was the best route for our family and for him to meet his needs. But I'm curious, did you ever find the community of support that you need? Did you, and through this process, did
I
you
did. When you're so totally focused on somebody else, and as you said, sometimes that's what you have to do and where you have to be. But one of my common phrases is you can't sprint a marathon. And living with anybody with mental illness is a marathon, particularly when you're trying to get it accurately diagnosed. So that is an area of my life now I'm incredibly conscious of. I have some very good friends who none of us have had perfect lives, so we're very accepting. My immediate family, I've educated. None of them quite knew what I was talking about, even though a lot of them are medical professionals, but they've come to accept the diagnoses. I'm not even saying they were resistant, it was more clueless. There would probably be a better way of putting it. So I was lucky in that way. I didn't have people who were close to me who were like, what are you doing? I also, the community, probably looking back in the last 5 years, the biggest gift to me has been a support group of parents who are all dealing with this. And I still remember being like, I found my peeps. So I think so when my kids say that but it so fits it. And it's like we have shorthand. You don't even have to explain something. I mean, all of us have had to take a tantruming child and leave an event or something. And we're doing it because we know it's the right thing to do. It's not even with anger. It's like, okay, when you get that point, you're overstimulated or, you can't deal with anymore for whatever reasons. And so we'll just leave. And, it's talking to other people who have to manage and modify their lives to really protect both them child and themselves. I mean, one of the kind of funny things is, of course, everything's virtual now, is when we're doing these groups, and we had a new participant recently on my favorite group, and she described us after about a month of being there. And she goes, it's so funny. I would say something. And then I look and you all are like bobbleheads. You're all sitting there when I'm saying something with your heads going up and down.
I know the support group you're talking about because I
we share that support group. But
yeah, but I say that it's weird because therapy is, some people's outlet, and I certainly participated in it. And we had a psychiatrist, and we did all those things, but the thing that was the most cathartic and the most healing and the most validating was being around other parents who have similar experiences. Like they had similar experiences with their school systems and all of those things, but I do appreciate, and I consider them, I call them my family, the extended family, the support group. But I also had to build an in-person support system and try to find recapture those parts of myself that have nothing necessarily to do with my child to help renew and fill me up. And so Cheryl, I'm wondering, how do you help parents develop that community? Because sometimes it doesn't exist and we have to build it, or we have to find it because it's there, but we don't know where to look.
About it.
So what do you do when you're helping and assisting families?
Well, part of what I do is there are couples who come to me who are local. And being in groups together, they, outside of the group, become friends and go and hang out together, which is beautiful and wonderful. And virtually, while I understand that many of us at times, more so than less so or whatever, need in person, this Zoom thing, I'm a highly sensitive person. This is sort of ideal. I get to feel, my body feels by seeing and hearing, and yet it's not as overstimulating. Somehow in person, if I have a lot of people, I really have to anchor myself to one person because the overwhelm of too many people all at once. It's just it's not wrong of me. It just sort of is a fact that I notice, and I have my hacks and how to deal and be with that. So one is the community that I create of my clients, couples being with each other. I'm also part of a parent coach for the Tilt, Differently Wired community.
Yes.
Which is a phenomenal, with Debbie Reber, her book Differently Wired, and her podcast Tilt, parenting podcast. Anyway, so within that community, it's connecting people, helping. It's another topic, sort of off topic of what you just asked me, but I want to come back to normalizing reactivity. So when we say stable, it's window of tolerance. So there are two topics. It's normalizing, we go up and down. Normalizing, we come out of our window of tolerance. And so that the shame that I believe these kids feel, we as parents can feel, the shame of reactivity needs to be obliterated. It's like, you don't have to be ashamed for needing to throw something and break something. And there's this physical energy that really has a life cycle of its own that needs to be taken care of and given outlets that don't make you bad or wrong, or don't make you feel like something's wrong with you because you have reactivity. You're myelinated the way you're the brain, that fast reactivity. So what seems to help many of the parents that I work with is when they hear, your children are often twice exceptional. And I don't know if people listening know that term in terms of,
yeah,
it's actually multi-exceptional. It's not just twice, like have differences that are beyond their peer group and different and lagging in skills and abilities with their peer group. That the quickness with which they can do the things they can do really well brings quickness for many of them in their emotional responses, in their physical responses. So can't have one without the other. Their brilliance in their areas of brilliance brings with it that brilliance and that speed of processing and whatever else it might be in their emotional reactivity, for example, and their need for physical offload of the emotion. So normalizing that, you're not bad for it. It's just a matter of this is what comes with this gift you've got. And we're going to figure out together how to give it the ways of offloading and giving you offload, rest, digest, refueling that works well for you.
It's so interesting when you had brought up prior, when we had met before this, you had met, you know Debbie and her work, and she has a great book called Differently Wired, and they were part of my community. It was like one of the first steps. And then you also know Zen Parenting with Kathy and Todd, and I was so excited that you knew these people, because those were steps for me to get to a more palliative approach. And here at CMHRC, we have created what is called palliative parenting. And so all of these components are in there, but it's a mind shift. It's not about our child and their symptoms and their neurology, because it's a multimodal approach. Not only, when you're talking about bipolar, there's a psychopharmacology, basically medication. I'm tongue-tied tonight. And so there's that aspect of it, but there's an environmental aspect of it as well. And so there's a mind shift that I do as a parent. It's about how I'm responding. And so one of our members says that when they spiral up, we have to spiral down. And we have to help them to regulate and to be the calm in that storm. And that's really difficult when you have a child who's really aggressive and they're coming at you, and it's tough stuff. But they were part of that process to get to the point where I'm like, okay, I have to think about quality of life. I have to think about palliatively, what is going to bring quality of life to my child. And that's where I have hope now, is the community. And so they don't know that they're part of my community, but they very much are. And then our in-person friends that are here, and our extended family members that are there. But it took it was this process to get through to where it's acceptance, and I think, Anne, and maybe you can speak a little bit to that, and we'll start to answer some questions. Acceptance there's always this cycle of grief, and I kind of revisit it from time to time.
Of grief,
And
you said?
yeah, because like every time I see pictures of friends and their children who get to do the walk across the big stage, and my child will have a smaller stage because we'll still do it, but it also will be smaller. And he did get to go to prom, and I didn't know that that would be an opportunity, but I did grieve over the last few times when people show their prom pictures, or when people are showing that their child has their first job and their driver's license. And so I go in and out, and my son will do those things, and he is about to get his permit, and he's 17, but it's much later than the other people for different circumstances. And so I go in and out of that process, and my community helps me to get to that place, and then I have hope. So, Anne, do you find that you kind of go in and
Yes.
out of those?
Yes. I think, like most things in life, we all struggle with accepting when our dreams and our reality or our reality doesn't meet our dreams. And when you have a dream of having whatever it was, but the perfect 2.3 kids, and they all ended up being captain of their sports teams and got into Ivy League colleges with no problem and whatever else it is, and you have a child that you're grateful either got a GED, or you managed to get to go to school that day, or they didn't have a temper tantrum in the lunchroom or whatever, it's like you're living in parallel universes. And I mean, I frequently look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on Death and Dying, of actually working through the stages. I mean, most of us, and Jen, I know you're very open about this, the denial that you had, even as a trained therapist. My 6-year-old doesn't have bipolar, you know, and you go through the steps and you bargain and you do whatever, but getting to acceptance is a much calmer and a nicer place to be. But I think it does, your dreams get activated when you see other people's kids doing things you know yours never will. There's a little bit of sadness there. And I think that's the acceptance and the self-compassion. But I think we have to, you know, it's part of being a grown-up. Darn, still haven't always found that fun, but you know, you accepting what you have and being grateful for what you have and proud of what your kid can do, even if it isn't what your dream was, is really pretty wonderful.
Cheryl, I liked what you had said earlier, that it's okay for adults to let it out. Because I call them, I mean, I admit, and I'm sometimes embarrassed by this, but sometimes I will have what I call an adult tantrum. And it could be over something really stupid, like I can't find my keys, and I always lose my keys or my cell phone or whatever. And I have like this mini meltdown, and I'm not role modeling what I need to be role modeling for a kid who I know is dysregulated. And I have to just like cool down and take a break. Or sometimes I've just done some weird stuff, and I'm not, I'm not perfect, but also having an outlet, that I have to have some kind of outlet to be able to channel that for. I do have some questions in the chat here. We have some personal stories, so I'm just going to just kind of narrow it down. There's a grandparent on here who says that, she's here to learn more, and that there's mental health and mental illness in their family. And so she has this great, amazing kid, but it looks like she's on the lookout for signs and symptoms. Do either one of you have some thoughts about what caregivers can do when they're on the lookout for these things, when they're concerned that it could happen, or it is happening, or there's some early signs that this is this is, an illness.
Can I say one sentence and
Mhm.
then we'll let Cheryl go in? Mine is very simple. Trust your gut. Learning to trust yourself in what, that's two sentences maybe, but learning to trust yourself in what you're seeing is probably the best thing you could do.
Huge. I totally second that.
I'm
That's what
sorry, I didn't mean take your.
no, I love it because it as you as a parent, me as a professional, it is what I do is empower people to transcend the fear so they can look at, if we're looking for clues with fear, it's going to lead us down false paths. The best thing we can do for ourselves is to ground ourselves, give ourselves the options for offloading, resting, digesting, refueling in a moment. Know that you're activated and afraid. You're on high alert. That's not going to help them because that activates their nervous system with something called mirror neurons. Like when you look at a baby and you make a funny face, the baby makes the funny face back at you. We literally have brain cells that their job is to mimic and be able to observe and mimic. Some have it with their voice, like impersonators, with their facial expressions or body position or tone. When we are activated on hyper alert, we're creating the thing that we're afraid to find. To get clear data, it is really important for us to come back to ourselves, clear our system, give ourselves compassion for the fear, totally wise and understandable. And then the wise you, giving ourselves the methods and the supports on an ongoing, regular, frequent basis to keep on clearing out our own system, so that we are looking from a discerning perspective rather than a fearful perspective. So which clues to look at? Trust your gut when you're not in a state of fear. When you're in a state of fear, give yourself what you need to process that, honor it, offload it, rest, digest, refuel. And if I can come back and segue back to something that Jen said, it's just right when you have what you call your adult tantrums. My guess is you're not strangling or destroying or hurting someone, right? They need to know they're not alone in our bodies do this to us. Our thoughts, our internal processing of life and of what's going on inside of us, we do this. This is normal. And those are fantastic opportunities to
Yeah.
model.
What I hear you saying though about like fear is also taking a non-judgmental stance of not assuming that what these behaviors are what's attributing to it, but just taking a step back and collecting that data so that we can share those to an appropriate resource. Because what I hear, what I'm reading next through several stories is, the school system, they felt like, did not correctly assist and make accommodation modifications. But I also am seeing here where there is a parent who said that I've heard doctors say that children can't live with bipolar disorder, that children can't live with severe and persistent mental illness. And I just want to speak to that it is an actual illness. And so there's no minimum or maximum age. It just is. And so even in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that is used in terms of criteria, there is no minimum age for bipolar, and there's no maximum age for that. But I have heard providers say, well, they're too old to be doing this now. And then I have heard, well, they're too young. They have to be, and it's weird ages, 13, some say 15, some say 21, some say 18. So it's whatever they think. But the reality is that it is, and if you want more information at CMHRC, we certainly do spend a lot of time talking about that. I do want to honor everyone's time. We're about 5 minutes from the end, and we will stick around to answer questions. But I want to give, for those who need to leave right at the time limit, the opportunity for Cheryl, if what you're saying resonates to them, how could they contact you? Can they utilize your services? What do you have for parents in terms of working with their well-being?
Absolutely. What I invite all of you to do is to take a complimentary session with me at Stoller, and that's spelled S-T, I can put it in the chat, STOLLER, parentcoaching.org/consult. Actually, the chat does not work. I can put it in the questions. In any event, so stollerparentcoaching.org/consult, schedule a free time with me. And should we decide that there's anything that you do want to work with me, only for those here, CMHRC, you have a coupon code that we will apply, CMHRC 15% off, whatever we agree would serve you well. In fact, right now there are pre-orders for my Unlock the Secret to Setting Boundaries That Work Without Rage, Retreat, or Regret, even when your kids are neurodiverse and intense. So that will be available May 20th. Pre-ordering, you get $10 off the 47 plus CMHRC. It comes down further with that 15% coupon. I will try. I don't think that there's a space to ask another question at this point because I think we've closed it. So I don't know where I can put in the chat. I hope that helps. Cheryl at stollerparentcoaching.com is my email address. Find me on TikTok. I just started doing that stuff. Family Wellbeing Coach. Instagram, Facebook. Find me anywhere you want to find.
I will have to find you on TikTok. And for those of you who want certificates of completion, I will remind you info@cmhrc.org. Again, that's info@cmhrc.org. And also you can write, hey, I want more information on how I can find Cheryl. And of course, we will email you and provide that information as well. And then, Anne, you're not only a parent, but you are a coach yourself. I know Cheryl focuses on family well-being and works with parents. Can you tell us a little bit about your work as a coach and what you focus on and how people can reach you?
Yes, and that's my focus now really is helping parents somewhat reconnect with themselves and live more joyfully. I do say I help those who feel helpless, hopeless, overwhelmed, and alone. So I really focus. I have a 4-week virtual course. There's rolling admissions every Monday. We also do a group session once a week if people do want to check in. And I will do what Cheryl's doing, which is the CMHRC 15. Right now, my website, we're revamping it to get this course up. So the easiest way to reach me is Anne, ANNE, at Reid Coaching, and that's REID coaching.com, or reach out to info or whatever. But this just came out of so much of the work that we've done in the support groups. I'm a huge believer in the palliative parenting, but I'm really not dealing with how to parent at all. It's how you feel. We talk a lot about grief and going through all the grieving, and just really on the self-care. I kind of ask you every day to do something good for yourself, but you have to pre-plan it so that it starts to become conscious and you start doing it every day. So anyway, it's really just to give back some to all the people that have given to me, and it's collective knowledge that I've learned the hard way and through my peers and colleagues.
Yeah, and that actually leads us. We'll continue to answer questions. So if you're able to put them on, we'll stick around afterwards. But I did want to honor everyone's time that we have here. And there was a question talking about their child was diagnosed at between 5 and 6, and so they've been on this journey for a long time. But now that their child is an adult, there's a disconnection in the relationship between the parent and the child. So that adult parent-child relationship issue. And she really, the idea of grieving resonated with this parent, and she wanted to know about how do you even begin to start to process that. And I'll just speak, in terms of, for me, in terms of grieving and, just that process of that, I think just recognizing that I am going through this grief process, but also finding the other parts of me. That's not the only relationship that I have in my life. It is an important relationship for me, but I also recognize that I have other important relationships as well that I can also attend to and allow those mature and to help me. But I don't know if either of you ladies want to just briefly kind of touch on, like, how would you start that process when you're grieving what you had hoped that adult relationship would be like? Because I very much still have, he's a teenager living in my home, so it's not the same situation.
I'll let you go first, Anne.
I think the biggest step for me was the first one, to admit that I really was grieving. And that probably only happened in the last 2 years. I'm kind of a latecomer to this. It was really a shock to me how much grief there was around it. And then it's, again, you eventually work to acceptance of it. It does flare up. I mean, it's what I said before, when you see what things won't be or what you would like them to be and they're not. And unfortunately, we can't change anybody but ourselves. Hard as I try, I've never managed to change another person. So it really is working on yourself and owning how painful it can be. It's okay. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah,
But it's okay.
before Cheryl answers, I'll just say that I just noticed on something that you said, like just identifying that it is grief, but also I recognize as a parent that some of the things that I grieve and miss, my child doesn't even recognize or even care about.
I
And
agree.
so it is my expectations that I had set for this human being that he had never set for himself. So I just want to kind of put it out there that, like, who is really grieving? It's because sometimes I think, oh, I'm grieving for him. No, that there's this part of me, and that's okay to be, like, I call it the selfish part of me, but that's okay. And just kind of recognizing it. But I just wanted to put that out there that, like, sometimes what I think he should be missing, not even a thought, doesn't even occur to him.
Yeah. And that's something sometimes we need to grieve as well, and understanding I talk about this in the course more, but the innate human drives for both independence and dependence. We have to belong. We have to know how to let ourselves depend on somebody and trust people to be reliable places to relax and depend on others, and be independent simultaneously. And that concurrence of things happens from birth to death. And the struggle that that can become a fight. Like when people, I remember once one of my kids had said to me, "Don't you dare say it, Mom. You say it, I can't do it. Even if I want to do it, don't say it." So that child had been been reading my mind, the where I'm going with this is what we need to help work towards, and that's what I do as a coach, is interdependence, where it's a whole lot easier to accept that our adult child is separate, is different, when it's a mutual relationship that's interdependent, that's a mutual creation. Given who I am right now in my life as me now, and who you, child, are in your life where you are now, what is it that we can do that we honor the love and connection between us and honors the full independence and autonomy of your figuring out your life and who you are and where you fit in and all of the internal signals you're getting? That's yours. I'm happy to support you when you and how you need it. So getting to that point of loving interdependence, honoring the separateness, that's a process. We can't do it alone. Collaborative proactive solutions, Ross Greene, has been life-changing for us. Somebody had asked about books. livesinthebalance.org, Ross Greene's work. The Explosive Child was a major turnaround point in many people's lives. But that honoring the need for independence, of autonomy. I have this acronym I call MACA. Doesn't mean anything. MACA or JACA. Meet or join someone where they are. Acknowledge their autonomy. Communicate confidence in their competence. And be available.
Yeah, that speaks to me in terms of, we also have palliative parenting, so it's a mind shift. So we kind of come at it from yes, this illness can be managed, but it's not something that we need to fix in terms of like their brain to be rewired or to cure. And it's the acceptance of they live with this illness, and we have to shift how we respond and how we think of this as parents. So we do have a class that we call palliative parenting. And again, if you're interested, you can email us at learning at cmhrc.org. And again, that's learning at cmhrc.org if you're interested. And we have, of course, information about our palliative parenting approach on our website. And I also saw a question that had to do, okay, so you're saying you had these challenges, and I've had these challenges at schools and IEPs, but it seems like that's just an impossible hurdle. We also have a school advocacy service where I actually go in to schools virtually, and so we help parents of children who live with mood disorders, and I sit at the table, we sit at the table, and we come up with evidence-based accommodations to be able to present and suggest to the team. And I also help bridge that gap so that we can educate the educators and the teachers, because they don't necessarily know about all of these different mental illnesses and what does this mean and what can we do to help support that. So I provide that background and that information and the evidence-based approaches that we could consider being part of their IEP or 504 with accommodations. So there is that. All right. And another question is, will this webinar be available to view after this is over? And the answer to that is yes. Most of our interviews are posted to our YouTube page after about 30 days. Our members at CMHRC get the opportunity to view those and to take their time to rewatch them. And then after about 30 days, we post them onto our YouTube page. So that absolutely will be. And I see another question about concerns that their child is maybe attention seeking. The word manipulative was in there, and blaming. And again, that's that mind shift. And then I'll let Anne and Cheryl answer. And that we look at these views as not being attention seeking or oppositional or defiant or manipulative, that these are symptoms of an illness, and that how we respond to that and how we manage that from a multimodal approach, that really matters, and that helps to meet their needs of where they're at. So I hear you, and I do recognize how difficult that must be. And a lot of parents who take our palliative parenting course, it's a 9-week course, and that helps them to shift their thinking and their response and their relationship with their child. But that's not unusual to see parents who are struggling with the idea that their child is manipulating them or being oppositional. Anne or Cheryl, do y'all have thoughts on that?
Of course, that it is understandable. We have been conditioned with the way we were brought up. There's so many aspects of this that make that question so understandable. And our fury that can't they just be a little easier? I mean, really, can't you just help me out here a little bit? They, in the collaborative proactive solutions that I recently mentioned, Ross Green has this phrase: kids do well when they can. Parents do well when they can. We all do well when we can. So when people want attention, yeah, there's something that's going on inside of them that's not a bad thing. People manipulating, it's like, why are they manipulating? What is it that they can't figure out how to get in a different way? So with the support, with the relationship that you have with somebody who you bring into your life, you can explore this together, because you are the expert on, you have all this gold mine of data in your head that someone who has experience, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, to help you mine your gold mine, find out what these clues are saying. What is it that's underlying the manipulation? How, I'll give an example also of how we can help get our children in the state of sharing with us so that they can share what they don't even know that they know, or whatever's on their mind. With one of my children, I would sense that, and he's not a talker, I would say, I feel like playing ping pong. In silence. I would play in silence, totally setting myself up. I just need to get him some cross midline movement, get the body moving, and then he'd start talking every single time. So helping parents figure out what is under those behaviors creates the connection, because at the core of it all, they need to be seen and heard. The secure attachment, seen, safe, soothed, secure. So if you want sort of like a shorthand for you, seen, safe, soothed, secure. How am I making this a moment for myself, of seeing myself, soothing myself, feeling safe myself, feeling secure that I am resourced?
I look at those as like I know for my son that when it looks like outsiders, because I would never frame it as manipulative, like that's just doesn't speak to me, it doesn't resonate with me. But other people might think that it's enabling or giving in to the thing that he's requesting. I know it's meeting a medical need. And so an example would be like he would go when he was younger, play in the sink at school. Well, his body overheats very easily. And I didn't know that, did not know that, had no idea. And so it looked like he was being naughty. It looked like he was trying to be manipulative. And then I always trusted and believed there was a reason for it. And thank goodness that I did, because there was a medical reason behind why he was seeking the things that he was. And what about your experiences as a mother? Did you ever see where there were some the medical or underlying needs that it wasn't manipulative?
Well, I, at this point in my journey as a parent and studying and everything else, I have to agree with both of you all. When I'm seeing things I don't like in my child, my first thing now is I consciously go to curiosity. And then I go, what's this a symptom of? And it's amazing for me when I do that, how it destigmatizes the behavior I really don't like, or it gets me out of judgment. Because when I'm in judgment of how my kids behave, I'm not necessarily the nicest parent. And so it enables me to kind of stand back and start seeing what's going on. And now I have a lot of clues about my daughter, and I'll address the heat and also that being oversensitized all the time. My daughter used to get incredibly oppositional anytime we had to go to a function. And I mean, like 2 or 3 days ahead. The doors would slam. She'd yell at me. I'd say yes. She'd say no. I'd say, oh, I'll say no. She would say yes. I mean, it was horrible to live when you're talking about going in a home or somewhere and you can cut, a knife can cut the tension. And after she was diagnosed accurately, and part of her issue is really a severe thermal dysregulation. And then she started talking about being always hot, which described why when she was 6 months old, she would perspire so much on her feet. If you took her socks off, you could literally wring them out. Anyway, she's like, Mom, those things, it's always hot. It's crowded. A lot of times there's stoves on, there's so much heat. There's so many people, you can't get away. And she goes, I just can't stand it. And then when I get hot, everything bothers me. And trust me, and she says everything, that sight, sound, touch, taste. I mean, all of her senses are firing like you would not believe. So and again, it took me a long time to learn this. So it's a skill that takes practice. But now I just stand back, curiosity, and then start looking at it as a symptom.
Yeah, that goes back to where Cheryl was like, in order to step back and be not judgmental and just collect that as data, because we can use that in part of our relationship and assisting them and informing the providers, informing the schools. I had a question about a parent who said that their child, how do we help them to socially, because there's not a lot available for them where they live. And I think that depends on the ages. And I'll say for my son, we have to, again, that building that community, not just for myself, but for him. And so because we homeschool, I'm finding co-ops or homeschool cooperatives with other teens his age. And we tried out several before we found the one that works. There's also a secular youth group that he fits into that we've rejoined again for that. And then technology has helped him to stay in contact, even with friends who live further away who have moved. But it is a process of helping him to stay connected. And the one thing that doesn't exist for him, not really, is that there's no real support groups for children who live with mental illness. But just by happenstance, because I am on social media and I'm connected with other moms locally, I was able to say, hey, I have this child who's this age and these are his interests. And then coincidentally, the people who responded, their children lived like had no idea their children lived with the same diagnosis. And we each kind of thought about it differently and handled it differently, but my child was able to interact with other people with similar issues as to him. And I carefully monitored that because it also could be potentially very triggering. But we find different outlets and avenues, and I'm still looking for that. And because he's 17 and he's about to get his permit and then get a job, and so we're looking at places where he applies, where do teenagers work? Where do people his age work? Because he actually has several opportunities available to him, but there's grown adults that work there and who are perfectly lovely and love him and respect him and would create that environment that he needs. He also equally needs to be around more people his age. And so it is really slippery. And so you just have to, I, as the parent, really do a lot of searching for how do I find those spaces for him to try out? How do I connect him with other people? And or Cheryl, do you have some thoughts on the social aspect of how do parents help their children with this?
Yeah, it is at any point in the process, I could tell it a hysterical story, but I don't think we have time for it. My mother trying to help my sister socialize, but that's for another time. There's the helping them socialize is finding, you're saying similar diagnoses, the interests, because there's people who are interested in what they want to talk about. Then they can come alive. Whereas if it's like, how do I insert myself into that conversation when, one, I have no interest. Two, I mean, I for one, as a kid, didn't understand what this whole friend thing was about. It's like people treat each other mean. Why would I want to do that? So partially empower them to trust their gut. I mean, maybe the kids that they know really cannot yet be the kind of friends that they know are people that you can trust to be secure with and to enjoy their company. My mother used to be so afraid that I had no friends. What she didn't know was that I knew that they were into sex, drugs, and alcohol in 8th and 9th grade. So it's like, why do I even want that? So help yourself begin to notice and know that underneath it, they are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and get a sense from them. If they, in fact, still don't come alive and have this innate sense of how to be social with others when they're with peers with the same interests, etc., it is a stepwise, one little thing at a time. Because if we inundate them, social groups often don't work for these kids. The social learning, social skills kinds of stuff, it's like it just doesn't work for any number of reasons. We get to tell stories about ourselves in certain circumstances. Like, I didn't want to be there. In a way, I wanted to be part of it, but a part of me didn't. So we can narrate about ourselves so that they can hear it. Sometimes people come in. I just want to make sure I say something about schools. One of the things I didn't deal with 504s, IEPs, etc. I just made sure that every teacher loved each of my children. That relationship, having a safe harbor to go to for the child to have, I think when schools work is when the kids who need it have an adult in the building that's their quote unquote safe adult, that they can give a signal to the teacher and then they can go to the teacher. it's not an answer for everyone, but if you don't have I couldn't homeschool. I just knew that that was off the plate for me. So if you have to be in schools, your kid has to be in schools. I think the most effective thing you can do, the smallest thing with the biggest impact, is build your own relationship with the teacher. I cannot imagine how hard it is to have 29 kids in a classroom and also have my child.
Yeah, I hear that. And I also, at the same time, many of the families that we work with also not only are looking for that connection, to have that genuine caring relationship, and at the same time, a lot of these are medical issues. So for my son, when he overheats, he can pass out. He's at risk for seizures. There's a lot of stuff that is happening there. And so that is why we have to have these intervention plans, because it's about being proactive and it's about educating all of it. And especially when you get older, you have more than one teacher. And I even have seen now in elementary schools where they switch classes, which wasn't what I did when I was little. I only had one teacher, but now some schools operate very differently. And so it's educating all of those teachers along the way. But Anne, I saw you nodding your head. I do
Yeah,
want to
the
say before I
bobbleheads here.
yeah, you're so right though that the social skills groups don't work for these kids. A
No,
lot of a lot of times it's about finding the people for the connection. And so when I work with other therapists, it's about, it's not about the CBT or the DBT or all the little letters. The most important part is that rapport, and rapport isn't about just day one and then you have rapport. You have to actually have that trust and that safety, and you have to build that over the next year. And it takes about a year before, on average, most of the families in our community can really trust and feel safe to be able to really do the work. And it takes a lot about that time to start to gain traction in the other um, approaches to treatment, because again, it's multimodal. So you're figuring out the medications, you're figuring out your other resources, and then you're helping people. So those relationships are really important. And I want to give you, you were nodding your head.
well, I don't know which part I was nodding my head at. In hindsight, I probably would have figured out something alternative for my daughter than going to school, because it was a nightmare. And she did end up eventually at a wilderness program and then a therapeutic boarding school and whatever. This is all pre-diagnosis. Sorry for my clock there. And you're so lucky if you're dealing with this much younger. She is still incredibly socially awkward, and I'm not saying anything she doesn't say about herself. She is innately introverted also. And I used to try to push her a lot more. I mean, I'm now talking about an adult kid who's on full disability who will live with me for the rest of my life. And as I put it, I don't fight her on it, but she has really a pretty active social life that meets her needs online with someone with kids that she originally went to school with around where we live, some of them from the treatment center. She's amazing at staying up on current events. I'm always surprised. She always, every morning, has to read me at least 10 jokes that she thinks is funny, and I don't always, but that's our bonding time. And I always offer, if we're doing something, for her to go with us. And then if she does say she'll go, I figured out how she can get home when she's had enough.
Yeah, I think that social aspect is our expectations of what they should be doing or wanting. And I know with my friends whose children are autistic, some of them are like they should want friends, or they think they're missing friends, when in reality that child is like, I'm perfectly fine. And so it's about grieving again what we want. And it's 9 o'clock, so we do have to end. There was one more question that was from a professional who said that they work with parents. And sometimes it's really hard for parents to accept again that diagnosis and to reach out for those resources. How do you get them? I think you just have to open up that window, and when they're ready, they at least have the information. They at least have the resources for that. I know that we at cmhrc.org, the Children's Mental Health Resource Center, we are available for parents, and we have a number of services, and we have a free 1 hour consultation for those who want to reach out and find out more, and what's available, what could it look like and be for their children. Because I know I have a lot of hope. I know that there's lots of children and now adults who are not only living with bipolar, or other mental illness, and thriving and very successful. And so we also have to think about what are we defining as successful too. Certainly some of these people are doctors, they're in the top of their field, but then there's other people who are like, I feel that I'm doing a good job, as a driver, as a messenger. I feel I'm doing a great job because I'm able to be a part-time janitor at at the local school district. I feel like I am successful because I'm maintaining, my wellness at home. And as Anne, you pointed out, your daughter is on disability, and yet she is doing the best she can. She is
Yes, and that's
yeah,
been something I worked to accept because it was definitely not my dream for her.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
she's happy.
Yeah.
She knows if she wants something else, all she has to do is ask. She's happy. I would never be happy where she is,
Yeah.
but she's not unhappy.
May
So,
I interrupt for a second? The happiness from their vantage point is really critically important. And I also want to just quickly mention the connecting to a why that feel contribute. I'm a contributor. I helped somebody smile today in that conversation. So something as simple as that. So if we as parents can have our radar set to pick up the tiniest little micron of, wow, that really touched me when you said that. I really appreciated that. Wow, look at you. How'd you get yourself to do that? So little things that help
well,
them look back at themselves and know, oh, I contributed.
Yeah, we call that catching them being good. And it's noticing the donut and not the whole. We tend to sometimes focus on the deficits, but they are more than their illness, they're more than their diagnosis. They are a person first with interests, unique abilities, and there's so much that they have. And I have one last question, which is, can we repeat that website to go for the certificate? Yes, it's an email, and we are going to email info@cmhrc.org. And I want to thank Cheryl for being with us tonight. And I want to thank Anne so much for your time. Thank you, ladies. It
thank
was
you.
wonderful. And good night to everyone.
Good night.
Good night.